Good now afternoon from the National Weather Service in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I'm meteorologist Donald Jones. I have to start off by apologizing for the delay in the briefing here this morning. Right about 5 minutes before we were about to go live, we got a notification from the National Hurricane Center that they were issuing a special advisory to add parts of southeast Texas into the tropical storm warning. Jefferson County was added to the tropical storm warning earlier this morning, but they wanted to add Chambers and a few other counties down closer to Galveston here with this special update, because we've been getting observations of tropical storm force winds 45, 50 miles an hour off the coast of Galveston Bay this morning. So they wanted to add those areas to the tropical storm warning. Of course, that required us to kind of reissue all of the different weather products that we issue here locally, and it kind of got a little chaotic here for 15 or 20 minutes or so. So I apologize for the delay, but we are here now, and so we're going to spend this time like a family together, and it's going to be wonderful, except for the tropical storm behind us. As you've no doubt heard by now, tropical or potential tropical cyclone 1 has been upgraded to tropical storm Arthur now. And I've already seen the pictures of the Arthur, the cartoon character, already circulating all over social media. So that's just wonderful. Fortunately, Arthur is not going to be a major hurricane, but you can see here it is a minimal tropical storm, maximum sustained winds currently near 45 miles per hour, and it's a very ugly storm. The center of circulation is somewhere up in this area here. I don't think I've got my little drawy thing. Where's my drawy thing? Let's see if I can draw on this. It's been a while since I've drawn on this, but the circulation is somewhere up in this area here or thereabouts. It may be on land, in fact, if not right off the coast. So it is very close to land here. It is going to track generally in this direction here over the next 12 hours or so. And provided it actually is off of land, it's going to be moving inland, probably somewhere just east of Galveston Bay, maybe Chambers County, Jefferson County, somewhere in that area there. But the important thing is not to focus on the center of circulation here. We say that all the time, but it's particularly true in this instance because all of the rain and most of the wind is well displaced from the center of circulation. There's about 30 knots of wind shear blowing from west to east across this storm, and that has the whole thing kind of displaced off to the east. So there's virtually no rainfall in and around the center of circulation itself. It's all in this cloud band out here to the east. This is what's going to be moving inland along with the whole system as we go through the afternoon and evening, and those bands are going to be set up in this kind of cloud structure here across southwest, south central, and southeast Louisiana. So those are the areas that are going to be looking at the most rainfall. There's going to be very little, if any, impact where the center of circulation itself actually is and where it's moving through. So kind of keep that in mind as we go through the next 12 to 18 hours or so, that just because the storm is expected to make landfall in a particular location doesn't necessarily mean that is the area that's going to see the most significant impact. Let me go ahead and pull up my little presentation here, and we're going to go through it, talk about what to expect, and then, of course, as soon as we wrap up this section here, give me about 10 minutes or so, we'll be happy to answer your questions just as soon as we wrap up our briefing. So feel free to post those in our comment section. I see a few of you have already found said comment section. Shannon says, good to see the forecasted amounts decreasing. You're right about that, Shannon. The forecast amounts have decreased across our area. This is our latest forecast. You can see there on the right side of the screen. We're looking at anywhere generally between a ½ inch to 2 inches across southwest Louisiana, but look at the much higher totals across south central and southeast Louisiana. Now, this is going to be highly dependent on exactly where those rain bands begin to move inland and where they set up. As is often the case, especially with weak tropical systems, we'll get a narrow band of 20 or 30 miles, and that area will get 6, 8, 10, 12 inches of rainfall, whereas most of the rest of the region gets comparatively very little. So the majority of the area, we're not going to be looking at huge rainfall totals with this, but some of you, especially across parts of central Louisiana, are going to be at risk for seeing higher rainfall totals. I'll show you our worst case scenario here in just a second to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. As I mentioned, tropical storm warning now in effect for Jefferson County, as well as other counties further south down towards closer to Galveston. We are still expecting between 1.5 and 3 inches of rain across the region, with some of those bands producing significantly higher amounts And then because we are looking at a tropical storm, we could have potentially 40-mile-an-hour winds right along the immediate coastline. Now, the good news is those winds are not going to make it very far inland. So it is going to be breezy this afternoon. 20, 25-mile-an-hour winds are not out of the realm of possibility. But this is not going to be a wind issue for anyone unless you're right along the immediate coastline. And even then, we're only talking 40 miles an hour. So that's, in most cases, not even enough to knock out power, let alone be a threat to property. What it is going to do, though, is push some water inland. So we are looking at coastal flooding conditions, 2 to 4 feet of storm surge possible along the coastline of southeast Texas, as well as southwest and south central Louisiana. And this is also going to include Sabine Lake and Calcasieu Lake. So if you live near the coastline or near those waterways, we are expecting some coastal flooding, 1 to 3 feet in the lakes, which I don't think is enough to directly impact properties, but it is going to get water out of the lakes more so than it otherwise would be. So kind of keep that in mind. And then we do have extensive river flooding ongoing across the region. That's not related to the winds, but because of all the rain we saw yesterday, and that will potentially get worse as we see more rainfall this afternoon into tonight. There are a few rivers that are forecasted to go major flood today or within the next couple of days. So kind of keep that in mind as well, that all the flooding does not necessarily come from the sky alone, but from the river flooding as well. I guess it does come from the sky to start, but then it runs off into the rivers. Shut up. All right. Here is the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center. This is actually an updated advisory that was issued at 11 a.m. Maximum sustained winds have been increased to 45 miles per hour. It was 40 miles an hour at 10 a.m. But with this latest update, they went ahead and raised that to 45 miles per hour. And that's mainly because we have gotten some observations off of Galveston Bay within that band I showed you, where we're looking at 45+ mile an hour winds. In fact, I think there were a few 50 mile an hour gusts out there too. So, you know, this is it's a low-end tropical storm, but there is some gusty winds out there. That's why I was saying there is going to be the potential for those tropical storm force winds right along the coastline. That's why we have those tropical storm warnings in effect. But this is not expected to get very far inland. Notice, though, that the winds, this is the orange circle here, that's the extent of the tropical storm force winds. They're displaced basically along and east of the center of circulation. There are no winds on the west side. There's very little wind at the circulation center itself. So all of the wind, or any wind that there is going to be displaced to the east of the center, and that has to do with that wind shear blowing across it, making this a very asymmetrical system. It is forecast to continue moving to the northeast. Again, assuming it's even offshore at this point, which is still a little, that's kind of a matter of opinion at this point, because it is right along the coastline, and it very well may just move right along the coastline all the way up. But we are expecting something of a landfall, or rather it's going to continue moving up the Texas Gulf Coast here. So the center of circulation itself is likely to move right across Galveston Bay, then right up through Chambers, Jefferson, and then eventually working its way further inland across southwest Louisiana through the afternoon and evening. So there may be multiple landfalls as it does a little wobbling, but it's going to move right along the coastline here through the rest of the day. Here's the latest look at the tropical storm warnings. We do have tropical storm warnings in effect pretty much for the entire area that we cover. So most recently added is coastal Jefferson County. Now this, you can see the red here goes all the way up to Beaumont, but this does not necessarily include Beaumont. We have to put the entire parish, or at least the southern half of the parish and counties, into it. But really the tropical storm force wind risk is only going to be right along the immediate coastline. So by the time you get up to Beaumont, we're only talking about winds maybe 20, 25 miles an hour. So this is not expected to be a significant wind issue. Same thing for Lake Charles. We're not expecting tropical storm force winds in Lake Charles, maybe some gusts to 20, 25 miles an hour, but that's not expected. Same thing for Lafayette. We're not expecting tropical storm force winds in Lafayette. We're not really even expecting tropical storm force winds down as far south as New Iberia. You may get some tropical storm force winds, or at least gusts, down in Morgan City, being as you're right along the coastline, but that's really the only major metropolitan area, if you want to call Morgan City a major metropolitan area, to see potential for some tropical storm force wind gusts. The rest are going to be more like in the 20 to 25 mile per hour range. So not enough to cause any kind of damage. I don't expect that those winds are going to be enough to cause power outages, so that's not really a concern. Areas that do see significant flash flooding, we were talking about yesterday the potential for a few trees to come down just in that saturated soil. So I'm not ruling out the possibility of a couple of neighborhoods seeing power loss, but it's not going to be widespread. We're not expecting any kind of significant power outages. Let's talk about rain now. Rain is going to be the biggest issue with this system. And I showed you at the top of our slides here, this is our expected amounts, essentially between about 1/2 inch to 1.5 inches across large parts of southeast Texas, southwest Louisiana. Notice the very large increase, though, in those rainfall totals as we get further into south central Louisiana and southeast Louisiana, anywhere between 2 to 3 inches. Now, the graph on the right here, this is showing our worst case scenario. This is how much we can expect to see if one of those rain bands gets set up over the top of you. So you can see 4 to 6, 6 to 8 down towards Morgan City. That's not to say that you're going to see that. This is the worst case scenario in the event that one of those tropical rain bands sets up over you and just kind of continues to train over you for several hours. Anywhere from 4 up to 8 inches, not out of the realm of possibility. Not everybody's going to see that. In fact, very few are going to see that. But those that do are going to be at risk for significant flash flooding. Areas that saw flooding yesterday are going to be particularly susceptible. So parts of Hardin County saw some significant flooding up towards DeRidder. I think just to the south of Leesville. A good swath of Vernon Parish saw some pretty significant rainfall totals yesterday. There was pretty high rainfall totals up towards Alexandria and parts of Rapides Parish and Avoyelles Parish as well. And we had some pretty good rainfall totals across kind of northern Allen, Evangeline, and St. Landry. These areas, in fact, I think there were still a few streets that were closed up near DeRidder earlier this morning. So just kind of keep in mind, those areas are already well saturated. There's a lot of water in the bayous, rivers, lakes, etc. That's what we call storage capacity. And all of those are pretty much filled to the brim at this point. So it's not going to take much rain to restart that flooding. So even if those areas only see, an inch or two, that could potentially cause at least some street flooding and exacerbate the ongoing river flooding and, flooding in your retention ponds. Anywhere that holds water is going to continue to kind of flow out of its banks with as little as 1 inch to 2 inches of rain. So kind of keep that in mind as we go forward here. This is the overall risk of flash flooding. We're talking, this one on the left here is today. You can see the areas highlighted in red, mainly south central Louisiana, Lafayette, New Iberia, down towards Morgan City. That's a moderate risk, or a category 3 out of 4 on the Weather Prediction Center's risk of flooding scale. That means essentially a 30 to 50% chance of seeing flash flooding within 25 miles of a location. So that would include Lafayette, again, New Iberia, Morgan City. We are expecting there to be some flooding this afternoon into this evening in those areas. As we head into tomorrow, the middle graphic here, most of that flood risk gets pushed off to the east and northeast, which is to be expected. Arthur is going to be moving further and further inland at that point. And those bands are going to kind of follow suit. Now, there are still going to be, oftentimes we'll get rain bands, even if Arthur's up here in southern Arkansas or Tennessee, we'll get 1 or 2 of those bands still wrapping into Arthur that are going to be training over the same area. That's where the risk for flooding tomorrow is going to come from. But I think we are going to be looking at less overall rainfall across the region. Then as we head into Friday, the risk gets even lower for our region. You can see there is still a slight risk up near Alexandria and parts of Avoyelles Parish, again, for any lingering bands. And this also accounts for that storage capacity we were talking about, because those areas had already seen quite a bit of rain over the last couple of days, but the overall risk continues to decrease. On a positive note, as we get into the Father's Day weekend, it does look like those rain chances are going to continue to go down. We've actually got a high pressure area that's going to be building in over the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, Gulf of whatever you want to call it at this point. Let's not get into a political debate about that. But the Gulf, and what's going to happen is that's going to actually it presses down on, it's in the upper levels of the atmosphere, but it actually causes sinking air aloft. So that's going to actually bring our rain chances down. Saturday afternoon, we're only looking about a 30% chance. And then Sunday, really no rain chances to speak of. So it is going to be dry for Father's Day proper. But it is going to be hot. That's the downside, because that sinking air also tends to heat up the air. So we'll be looking at high temperatures in the lower 90s. That's the joys of not having a tropical system over you. So we give away one hazard for another. Flood warnings in effect because of all that potential that we've been kind of harping on here. Obviously, we do still have this flood watch in effect until 7 p.m. tomorrow evening. Now, we may be able to cancel that a little bit before then once we see those rain bands set up in areas that are no longer at risk, or at least scale this back. But at least for right now, this is in effect until 7 o'clock tomorrow evening. Storm surge, we are still looking at 2 to 4 feet of surge across coastal portions of southeast Texas and southwest and south central Louisiana. I kind of hit on that already. 1 to 3 feet expected in the coastal lakes and bays. All the way from Galveston Bay, Sabine Lake, Calcasieu Lake, and Vermilion Bay are expected to see at least some minor coastal flooding because of those steady southerly winds that we're expecting to see. And this goes further to the east with that the minor coastal flooding all the way to the mouth of the Mississippi River, because this whole area is going to be looking at those sustained southerly winds that are going to push water up into the area. It's not going to be a significant storm surge, but there is going to be enough to be problematic for those along the immediate coastline. And along those immediate kind of surrounding the lakes and bays. We do still have a coastal flood warning in effect to account for that, and coastal flood advisories for the lakes and bays to account for that as well. I've gotten questions about the risk for tornadoes as these storms make landfall. When anytime a tropical system is making landfall, there is a low-end risk for a quick spin-up tornado. We haven't seen any yet today. There will be the possibility, though, as we go into this afternoon and tonight as that better rain begins to lift across the area. So we do have a marginal risk for severe weather issued by the Storm Prediction Center, essentially along and south of Highway 190. And this is in response to that low risk for potential tornadoes across the region. We had one, I think, yesterday in southeast Louisiana. That was the only one, but there is going to be a risk for that for today and tonight. This is getting into tomorrow. You can see the risk area shifts to the east, mainly across southeast Louisiana. Morgan City is included in this marginal risk, but the risk for tornadoes will largely have ended by tomorrow for our area and have shifted over into southeast Louisiana, where those lingering bands are expected to be. Mention about the river flooding. This is a major issue or will be a major issue if it's not already for a lot of people, because we have not reached crest for a lot of these area rivers, but we are looking at anywhere from minor to major flooding across our area rivers. This is a forecast graphic here, so it doesn't exactly show what is happening at the moment. Let me see if I can make this full screen, just because it looks like it's not showing up very well on there. The area is highlighted in yellow. That is your action stage, I do believe. Yes. The area is highlighted in orange. These are your river points. That's what you're looking at here. Our minor flood stage, red is moderate, and purple is major. There's no purple showing up on there at the moment, but I do believe there are a couple of sites that are expected to go into major flood. So if you are along these area rivers and need the forecast information, this is available on our Weather Service website. It's weather.gov, and just click on the Lake Charles area, and there is a rivers section where you can pull this up and take a closer look at exactly what the forecast is for your river location. So that's what we have here this early afternoon from the National Weather Service. One more thing I want to show you here. I just pulled it up. I want to show the radar just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on at the moment. You can see there are a few showers and thunderstorms beginning to move inland. Most of that activity, though, is well off to the south still, out over the coastal waters. Keep in mind that the radar located here in Lake Charles, it can't get too far out over the coast, so you're not seeing a large swath of the rain that's ongoing out there that we can see on satellite. But it is out there. It is going to be moving towards us. But for the most part, we really have not seen a whole lot across the area yet today. You see a few spotty showers kind of moving in along the coast and then working their way inland. Expect that this activity will continue to work to the coast and inland as we go through the afternoon and evening today. All right, let me go ahead and run back up here. And now if you have a question that I didn't answer with my really long spiel there, I'll be happy to answer it for you here over the next little while. So let me go ahead and jump back into our comment section and see what kind of questions you have. Willie says it's blowing pretty good here in San Leon, Texas. What defines or what accounts for pretty good? I mean, 20-25 mile an hour is pretty good for a normal day, pretty weak for a tropical system. Donna says, thank you, Mr. Jones. You're welcome, Donna. Megan says you might lose your hat at Holly Beach. Just a little wind now in Bridge City. Richard's asking about Vermilion Parish. Again, the rain is the big issue. Vermilion Parish is under a tropical storm warning, but it's mainly just going to be right along the immediate coastline. So those tropical storm force winds are not expected to get very far inland. Tracy asked what rainfall is expected there in Lake Charles tomorrow. Tomorrow I think the majority of the rain is going to fall today and tonight. We are still going to have some showers around tomorrow, but the majority of the rain that is going to fall is going to be today and tonight. You can see we're generally expecting between 1 and 1.5 inches in the Lake Charles area today and tonight. But should we get one of those bands on there, over here on our right is our worst case scenario, we could see up to 4 to 6. Roxanne is praying for no tornadoes. I agree. Let's hope we don't have any tornadoes. The overall tornado risk is quite low. And usually, if you do have a tornado in a tropical system, it's very weak, relatively speaking. It's an EF0, which is to say under 100 miles an hour. It is still capable, certainly, of doing some damage, but the overall risk of that is pretty low. Let's see. Tommy says rain gauge check this morning at the Jefferson Chambers County line. Total since Monday, 3 inches now. It's muddy, sloppy with standing puddles. And that's what I was talking about earlier with, a lot of the rain that we've seen over the last couple of days has kind of primed, I don't want to say primed the ground, but it's saturated the ground to the point that it's not going to take a whole lot of rain to start that flash flooding. And that's not just in southeast Texas, but up towards central Louisiana got hit particularly hard. I was looking at some of the rainfall totals up there earlier this morning. And it ranged from roughly about 5 to 8 inches yesterday that we got in that 24-hour period. So that is certainly enough to, besides the flooding it caused yesterday, all of that water has not run off yet. It's still, in the soil, in the area waterways. So any new rain that falls, it's not going to have that much room to go anywhere. Let's see. Mac Medic says he just had a 36-knot gust on my oil platform. And that's some of that data is what's being used to inform the Hurricane Center's decision to increase this to a tropical storm and now a 45-mile-per-hour tropical storm. We were looking at some of those wind gusts out there on the oil platforms. So thank you for that report. We certainly appreciate that. And I'll pass that along to the Hurricane Center too, just as a confirmation of what they were looking at. Nikki asked, where is landfall going to be? That's a tricky question because it may actually already be on land, or if not, it's very close to the coastline. You can see, taking a look at this is the forecast track here, and it's basically just going to move kind of right up the Texas coast there. So it may kind of wobble on and offshore several times. So there may be multiple landfalls, in fact. But the landfall location is really not that important because as we were looking at the satellite earlier, let me see if I can pull that back up real quick. All of the activity associated with this system is well away from the center of circulation itself, which is somewhere right up in here-ish, thereabouts. So it's essentially going to move up and across Galveston Bay and into parts of southeast Texas, but all the rain and all the wind associated with it is way out here off to the east. So the center of circulation is really not that important in this particular scenario. All right. Let's see. Debbie is concerned about possible road flooding between Opelousas and Slidell tomorrow when we head to Orange Beach, Alabama. What do you think? I think that there is going to be the possibility of some road flooding down there. Probably more on the closer to Slidell than Opelousas, but anywhere in between there will be the potential depending on where those rain bands set up. Yeah, so you definitely check your roadways before heading out. And that goes for anyone. We have in Louisiana, it's the 511la.org. It's a great website to check road conditions and check on road closures before heading out. So do that. Texas has one too, through the Texas Department of Transportation. I don't have theirs memorized, but I think you just Google the Texas Department of Transportation or DOT, and you can find the road closures for that area. But the road closures are going to be much more likely, I think, in Louisiana than in Texas, and specifically south central and southeast Louisiana. Stephanie says some tornadoes might not form with this storm in the Benton area. Again, the overall risk of tornadoes is very low. It's not zero, but it is very low. There's always a risk of tornadoes with landfalling tropical systems, though. Jeremiah, I know he did, but it seems there is miscommunication between them and local meteorologists. I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to. I must have missed the first part of that. I am a local meteorologist. I'm here in Lake Charles, so we are local as you're going to get, pretty much around here. Aaron asks, how fast does the wind need to blow the mosquitoes away in Big Lake? Unfortunately, probably more than you're going to see. I would love to have the mosquitoes blown away just about everywhere. Renee's asking about a flight in Alexandria tomorrow. I think it's probably not going to be an issue. I expect that, you're not going to have any kind of winds delaying anything. You're probably going to be dodging some showers, but that's traditionally not enough to have issues on aircraft, at least not commercial aircraft. Catherine, what should we expect in the DeQuincy Singer area as well? We'll be laying a loved one to rest. I'm sorry to hear that, Catherine. Depending on whether that's today or tomorrow, you are going to be looking at rain later on this afternoon into this evening. Again, wind is not going to be an issue. Tomorrow, it's going to be a little more scattered. There are still going to be showers and storms around, but there's not going to be as many as we're going to see today and tonight. It says it's looking like it already landfall near Bryan Beach, Texas, or Freeport, Texas. That's very possible. The Hurricane Center is probably not going to declare a landfall unless it clearly gets back out offshore and then moves inland again. But what will happen is when they go back and reanalyze the storm afterwards, they'll determine, did it bubble off and back on or whatever the case may be. So they may end up calling it multiple landfalls by the time it's all said and done. Dawn asks, is there any chance of strengthening? Not much, because first, again, like we were talking about with it potentially being right along the coast or perhaps inland, it is wobbling right near the coast. A lot of land interaction, that's a limiting factor. It also has a pretty strong wind shear blowing across it. That's why those rain bands are displaced well away from the center of circulation. There's about 30 knots of wind shear blowing across it. So no, we do not expect any kind of rapid intensification, Could the winds go up to maybe 50 miles an hour before landfall? That's not out of the realm of possibility, but this is not expected to become a hurricane. Casey asks, what does that mean for power outages in the area? I'm not expecting much in the way of power outages. There could be a few neighborhoods that go out. I think the more likely power outages are going to be due to the heavy rain and flooding, weakening root structures of plants, trees, whatever the case may be, that could potentially fall onto a power line. I think that's a more likely reason for flooding or for power outages than wind. So I don't expect there's going to be a lot of power outages. There could be a few, but I don't think there's going to be many. There you go. Serena got me the text dot there. So text dot in Texas will have road closure information should flooding begin to occur in Southeast Texas. Sujay, I'm probably not pronouncing that right, and I apologize if I'm not. Is it true that we are looking at Super El Nino this year, which could cause disruption in Atlantic storm systems forming? Yes. In fact, we do have a El Nino advisory, as they call it, which means the El Nino is ongoing. The forecast is for a Super El Nino, which is essentially just what it sounds like. It's an El Nino pattern, which for those of you who are not familiar with exactly what that is, it's a warming of the Pacific Oceans off the west coast of South America. That's what it is. But it has global implications. That very warm air causes a lot of moisture and a lot of rising air in that part of the world, which causes sinking air in other parts of the world. It's a whole global circulation pattern is essentially what it is. And what happens is in an El Nino pattern, regular or super or otherwise, it tends to increase wind shear across the tropical Atlantic Ocean, which tears apart tropical waves that would otherwise form into hurricanes. So yes, generally speaking, and strong El Nino pattern results in fewer storms, fewer tropical storms across the tropical Atlantic, and that does include the Gulf of Mexico. The opposite is true in the East Pacific, because it happens because that's where that rising action is. That actually causes more tropical systems in the East Pacific, and we've seen that already this year. We've had several out in the East Pacific already, with this one though being only our first one here in the tropical Atlantic, which does include the Gulf, and hopefully it's one of only a few we're going to have, and hopefully the last one we've got to deal with this year. That would be fantastic. Lisa says, we run a homeless outreach. How much rain can be expected tomorrow in the Lake Charles area? Again, generally speaking, we're expecting somewhere between 1 to 1.5 inches. That's going to be for both today and tomorrow. Tomorrow, I think we're going to see less rain. So the majority of the rain, I think, is going to be today and tonight. By tomorrow, we're just going to have, I think, some scattered showers around. But the majority of the accumulating rainfall is going to be this afternoon and into tonight. Alex asked about what can we expect in the Morgan City area. You're going to be looking at probably higher rainfall totals because, again, the rain is well displaced to the east of the center of circulation. So the rain bands, at least the latest computer models we have, indicate that they're going to be setting up more likely across south central and southeast Louisiana. So the Morgan City area is expected to see higher rainfall totals and a higher overall risk for flooding this afternoon into tonight. So we're looking at anywhere between 1.5 to 2, but in our worst case scenario where those rain bands set up, if they do set up over the top of you, 6 to 8 inches, not out of the realm of possibility. Adrian says, what are your thoughts on flooding near the Imperial Calcasieu Museum? I'm assuming that's here in Lake Charles. Again, it's going to depend on exactly where those rain bands set up. I think the overall risk for Lake Charles is significantly lower than what we were just discussing over towards Morgan City. There are going to be showers and storms around, but generally we're expecting 1 inch to 1.5 inches. If one of those bands were to get over the top of us, 4 to 6 inches, not out of the realm of possibility. I think that's a pretty low probability though. So I wouldn't make any changes for indoor activities tomorrow. Just continue to monitor the weather situation through the evening. But I think the probabilities of significant flooding in Lake Charles at this point are fairly low. Tommy has a barometer and it's dropping, and it's dropped below 30 millibars. I hope not. You might mean 30 inches of mercury. 30 millibars would be not enough to breathe in. The air would be so not dense effectively. Normally we operate around about 110 to 115, 1,010 to 1,015 millibars regularly. A tropical storm will usually have pressures in the 990s or thereabouts. So yeah, I think you probably mean inches. 30 inches of mercury would be a perfectly normal pressure. In fact, standard atmospheric pressure is 29.92 inches of mercury. So I think that's what you're referring to rather than millibars. Let's see. Lisa is asking about leaving Ragley, heading to Mobile, turning and heading north, travel safety in the morning. I think you're going to be driving through some of those rain bands and potential flooding, depending on exactly where it sets up, because you're going to be driving essentially west to east through the area most at risk for flooding. So again, check those your LA 511 to check for road closures before getting out on the road tomorrow. Drake says, every meteorologist is playing this down as an honorary named storm, basically just a thunderstorm to them at this point. It's really not that different than a typical low pressure area. I mean, we named it this morning, but the impacts haven't changed at all. So that's important to keep in mind. I do expect there's going to be some flooding across parts of south central or southeast Louisiana later on today and tonight. But again, this is not going to be a wind issue, name or not. It's still a minimal tropical storm, and there's really just not a whole lot to it. So yeah, I think that's we are trying to downplay it deliberately, and I'm glad to hear that everybody's doing that, because I'm not trying to downplay the flooding, but the wind I'm certainly downplaying, because we're really not going to see a whole lot of impact from it. Sujay says, so this is between a light to major thunderstorm, basically. I'd compare it, if you're under one of those rain bands, it's going to be like a tropical downpour that just kind of sits over you for a long period of time. It's not going to be severe. You're not going to be talking about, damaging winds. You're certainly not going to have hail. The tornado risk is very low. So yeah, in a manner of speaking, it is kind of just like an afternoon thunderstorm. It's just larger and could potentially last longer. But the effects, the impacts that you're going to experience are going to be roughly the same, yes. Okay. Tommy corrected herself. It's in inches, she says very emphatically. You're quite welcome. I figured that's what you were talking about. I just had to give you a hard time and give everyone a meteorology lesson at the same time. All right. Colby says, what are the chances I'm golfing Saturday in Lake Charles? I'd say pretty good, actually, because by that point, this is going to be out of here. And there may be a few scattered afternoon thunderstorms, but the weekend's actually looking pretty good. It's going to be hot, but there's going to be a lot fewer storms around. Megan wants to know why I look like my brother and like Charles Payne mixed together. I have no idea who Charles Payne is, so that might separate me from your brother. Late to the party. Everyone's late. That's okay. I was late today too, so don't worry. We were 20 minutes late, 30 minutes late almost getting on the air here. When should we see heavy rain in Lake Charles starting? If you're going to see it, it's going to be probably this evening. Late this afternoon into this evening. Taking a look at the latest radar out there. Again, most of the activity is offshore. There are a few showers out there, so we are, there actually is one kind of just to the east of the Lake Charles area. So you may encounter a couple of those early this afternoon, just very brief showers, but the majority of the activity, as you can see there, is still well offshore, and it'll be moving in later on this evening. All right, so I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap up for the time being. If you have a question that I missed for some reason, I promise you I didn't do it on purpose. Feel free to send us a direct message on Facebook. My email is also up on your screen there. Let me get Countess out of the way there. You can see on the bottom right-hand corner of my screen, if you have a question, I'll be happy to answer it. If you want to email me, donald.jones@noaa.gov. You can also give us a call here at our office, area code 337-477-5285. I admit we were having some phone issues this morning, but they appear to be working properly again. So if you do have a question, feel free to give us a call that way, and we'll be happy to answer those questions as well. If there are significant changes to the forecast track or intensity, we will do another one of these later this evening. Otherwise, we're going to kind of take a wait and see approach to see, because I think by this time tomorrow, the storm's going to be well inland. So there won't be a need to do another one of these tomorrow. But if there is any kind of changes between now and later on this evening, we will get on here and provide you another update. Otherwise, keep an eye out for our updates through social media, the Weather Service webpage, or our extensive network of news sites and organizations and apps all across your local viewing area. All right. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your afternoon and evening. Stay safe, stay dry. Check out the road conditions with the LA 511 or Texas DOT before you get on the roads the next couple of days, just to make sure there's no flooding. And we will talk to you again, hopefully, maybe sometime in, I don't know, Christmas. We'll do one of these again. Hopefully this is the last time we've got to deal with one of these tropical systems. I fear it won't be, but we can pray. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. We'll talk to you again soon.